A class action lawsuit against Capital One and Amazon will go ahead. Quebec's Superior Court authorizing the suit on Thursday. The companies will have to defend themselves against an accusation that they've been negligent with the personal information of millions of their customers. 6 million of those customers are right here in Canada. With more on this, let's go to Elodie Meyer, a cybersecurity lawyer. Elodie, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Elias. Thank you for having me on.
Okay, so first things first here. What is being alleged in this lawsuit? Well, what does this class action lawsuit say that Capital One and Amazon are guilty of?
Yeah, so the class action suit is saying that Capital One was processing personal information of millions of customers and that they didn't safeguard this information properly. What happened essentially was in 2019, an employee of Capital One accessed a lot of this information. So you're saying 6 million information about 6 million Canadian people, but over 100 million American citizens. And Amazon here is being pulled in because essentially Capital One was storing all their information on an Amazon platform. So Amazon isn't as much as fault as Capital One here, or what's being alleged. Obviously, because Amazon was just providing the hosting services. Capital One is really the one where the class action suit is going after and saying, you had an employee who accessed our information. She shouldn't have. She wasn't allowed to do that. And now we are at risk. We think maybe our identity will be stolen, compromised in any way.
So why do you think this keeps happening? Because I just think about, it doesn't happen every day, but I would say genuinely that it's about once a month or so. Once every 1 or 2 months, I'll get an email from a company that I have an account with, and they'll say, we just want to alert you. There's been a breach. We don't think your passwords are gone, but they may have had access to your emails or this kind of thing. Like it just seems like this happens all the time.
Yes, they happen all the time. And you've been getting an email once or twice a month now, but it really does happen almost every day. We're starting to get emails now because the law is forcing companies to notify individuals. But before that, the companies weren't forced to notify individuals, so we didn't necessarily know that our information was being compromised. Now, there's also a big increase in cyber attacks globally, so obviously that has an impact. But here in the Capital One case, it's in what they would consider like an inside job, right? This is not a hacker that came into their systems. It was really an employee who decided to access the information of people that she didn't need or should have had access to that information. What's important to point out here, though, is that she went on this person that was this employee that was accused of stealing the information went on trial in the U.S. And they concluded that she didn't communicate this information to anyone in any way. So they're saying, okay, risk of damages are quite low. But it's not a classic cyber incident as we hear. Like, it's not someone who hacked into anyone's system to get this information.
How important is that part where they don't think there are any damages? Does it even matter? Even if at the end of the day there aren't damages to the individual, the fact that your information wasn't kept secure, is that enough for this lawsuit to be successful?
So my answer would be different if this happened next year or anytime after September of this year. This being happening in 2019, damages will be important here because if Capital One was not negligent, if the people didn't, no identity was stolen or they didn't have any particular issue other than, like stress and anxiety related to this type of incident, then there's not going to be much that's going to be given to them. And at this point, we don't even know. Capital One hasn't said if they intend on appealing the authorization for the class action suit. We don't know if they're going to want to settle out of court. We're not really sure where they're going at this point. They haven't publicly announced it yet. But damages will be important for this 2019 event. As of September 2023, so a month from now, the law will provide for automatic compensation for individuals who have their information stolen, regardless of the use that's made of that information afterwards. The other little thing here that might be problematic big thing I'm going to say that could be problematic for Capital One is the fact that they were keeping information longer than they should. So this is information that they were authorized to collect and process at one point in time, but once the processing activity is done, which was to check credit scores and check if people were had what it takes essentially to get different types of credit cards. Once those checks were done, they should have, deleted the information or kept it in a safer manner. But after a certain time, you don't need this information anymore. You delete it to protect the people. And what the class action suit is saying is that they're going back to information all the way to 2004. So we're thinking Capital One has been keeping for over 15 years information that they should have been deleting regularly and which would have protected everyone in this case.
Yeah, if you don't hang on to documents for 15 years, they can't get stolen. We're with Elodie Meyer, a cybersecurity lawyer. We're talking about a class action lawsuit against Capital One and Amazon that was authorized by Quebec Superior Court on Thursday. Now, here's a question. In this instance, you have a rogue employee, right, that's able to access this data. Why do we keep seeing that? And how should companies be guarding against that rogue employee? Because it seems, if you've got thousands of employees, you're always going to have one bad apple, no matter what. So how do you guard against the rogue employee? How do you protect people's privacy if there could always be one employee with bad intentions?
Yeah, that's a complex question because, obviously we hope that our employees are loyal and that they will, follow best practices within the company, but that's not always easy. Big companies now, and this is how they figured out who was the person that accessed this information. They have logs. They have things that allow them to kind of see afterwards who went into a database that they weren't allowed to go into and things like that. But that's not enough, right? We need more preventive measures. So there's also there's all sorts of access controls that can be put in place for different applications, different servers, and then basic rules of employees that should have access to personal information only on a need-to-know basis. If the employee doesn't need the personal information to do their job, then they shouldn't have access to it at all. But after, there is, so many things that we can do technologically, but unfortunately, at some point, we do rely on the human at the end of the day. And one of the main sayings in cybersecurity is that the human is the weak link of the chain, and technology cannot solve all of our problems.
So let me ask this, because you mentioned that the laws are changing here as of September. So in less than a month, the laws are changing, and you said that it'll be in law the amount of damages, like how much you'll have to be compensated. Do we have dollar signs here? What when this law changes, what will happen if a case like this happens in a month from now?
Yeah, so there's sanctions have there's two parts to sanctions. One would be fines imposed by the Commission d'accès à l'information du Québec. Those fines are going to be, could be very massive. Dollar signs for maximums would be $25 million or 4% of worldwide turnover for international corporations. That's a lot of money compared to what we see right now. Then as for compensation for individuals, they haven't put a maximum, but they did put a minimum in, and so they said $1,000 would be the minimum per person that has their information access. So if we're talking about 6 million people with their information access, add 3 zeros at the end of that, we might be putting Capital One into bankruptcy, right?
Oh, yeah.
So there's going to have to be some sort of, they're going to have to adapt. They're going to have to find a way to make this make sense, to protect the people, but not put companies into bankruptcy or these issues either. But yeah, so dollar signs have appeared in the law, and as of September 22nd, any type of incident that would cause some sort of there would be a leak of personal information would be entitled to those compensations.
Well, if you want companies to take things seriously, you got to make them pay, right? So that it'll be interesting to see how the new rules change things. Elodie, it's a wonderful discussion. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Elias.
That is cybersecurity lawyer Elodie Meyer.